After an exhausting shift, the last thing I expected to see was a house packed with people waiting for a 5-course dinner. Instead of turning into the perfect hostess at the cost of my own sanity, I chose to do the unthinkable. I put myself first. Here's why I shut the door on my husband's family and why I don't regret it for a single second. They say love means compromise, right? That you adjust, you bend, you learn to live with the quirks of family. But what if those quirks aren't just inconvenient? What if they're slowly, systematically, erasing you from your own life, from your own home? My name is Clara. For 34 years, I built a life that was truly mine. A life I genuinely loved. I was a pediatric occupational therapist, helping kids navigate their world. It wasn't just a job, it was a calling, the kind of demanding, sustaining work you pour your heart into. And then there was my apartment. My sanctuary. A sun-drenched, 2-bedroom haven in a city I adored. I bought it myself at 31, piece by carefully chosen piece, each item a testament to my independence, to building a home exactly how I wanted it. The late afternoon sun would flood the living room, turning everything golden, peaceful. It was my peace. Then Marcus came along. A civil engineer, tall, thoughtful, with a dry wit that felt like a quiet secret shared between us. We fell hard, dated for 8 months, then moved in together, into my apartment. Of course, it was bigger, brighter. I agreed with the warm, confident certainty of a woman who finally, after waiting so long, believed she'd found the one. 13 months later, we were married. A small, intimate wedding in my aunt's garden. He cried during the vows. I really thought that meant something. His family, though, that was a different story. They were everywhere. A huge, boisterous, overlapping unit. Parents an hour away, 2 married brothers with kids, aunts, cousins, friends who were cousins. They operated like a single, swirling entity, constantly moving in and out of each other's lives with a casual intimacy I, an only child from a quieter home, simply didn't understand. At first, it felt like abundance. All that warmth, all that noise, all those people welcoming me with hugs and opinions and homemade food. I thought, this is it. This is what a big family feels like. What I didn't see then, what dawned on me only slowly, like realizing a room has been getting colder, not when the temperature drops, but when you finally notice your arms are wrapped around your chest for an hour, was that welcoming me and respecting my home were, for them, 2 entirely unrelated concepts. The first time Marcus's brother and his wife came to stay for a long weekend, I got 2 days' notice. The second time, 1 day. The third, I found their car in my parking spot when I got home. By the 4th visit, I'd stopped expecting any notice at all. Each time, I'd bring it up with Marcus. Calmly. Specifically. The way my friend Patricia would later say I approached everything, with care, precision, and ultimately, insufficient force. He'd apologize. I'll talk to them, he'd promise. Their family, they don't see it as imposing. And then he'd promise it wouldn't happen again. And each time, it did. Slightly worse. I need to be specific about what slightly worse actually meant, because it's easy to sound petty when you list these things. But these weren't small, isolated incidents. They were corrosive. Marcus's mother used my kitchen without asking, leaving it looking like a war zone. His aunt rearranged my bathroom cabinet. Darling, you had it so cluttered, she cooed, so I couldn't find my own medication for days. His brother's kids drew on my hallway wall with a ballpoint pen. And when I gently pointed it out to their mother, she laughed, kids will be kids, then told Marcus I'd been cold to her. And he, of course, dutifully reported this back to me, hoping I'd take it as constructive criticism. I took it. I softened. I told myself this was marriage. This was what love looked like with a big family. That the discomfort was mine to manage. That love demanded adjustment, flexibility, the willingness to hold my own needs loosely. None of it was true. But I believed it long enough to let my apartment, with its amber light, its carefully chosen furniture, its quiet charm, become something I was merely hosting in, rather than truly living in. And then came that Tuesday in November. I'd had a genuinely awful day. One of my young patients, Ethan, a 6-year-old with cerebral palsy, had a major setback. A heartbreaking conversation with his parents, hours of soul-crushing paperwork. I was emotionally drained, utterly spent. I left the center at 6:15 p.m., grabbed a tuna sandwich, and ate it in my car. I knew, with the bone-deep certainty of a woman who'd been in this situation too many times, that I couldn't walk into my home hungry. I parked, climbed the 3 flights, put my key in the lock, and opened my door. And there they were. 6 of them. Marcus's cousin Dimitri and his wife Lena on my couch. Dimitri's mother, Marcus's aunt Galina, in my armchair, the one I'd carried up 3 flights myself, upholstered in a fabric I'd spent 2 weeks choosing. 2 of their kids, 7 and 9, glued to the TV, volume blasting. Marcus's younger brother, Potter, beer in hand, lurking in the kitchen doorway. And Marcus? He was on the smaller sofa. He looked up at me with that expression. The one I'd learned to read precisely over 2 years of marriage, the look of a man who knows he's done something wrong and is banking on my decency not to make it visible. Clara. He stood up, almost too eagerly. You're home. Come in, come in. Look who's here. I looked. I smiled. It was automatic, that smile. The one that costs absolutely nothing because it means absolutely nothing. Galina kissed my cheek. Lena waved. The kids didn't even glance up. Potter lifted his beer. And the kitchen, oh, the kitchen reeked. Onions. Something heavy. Something that would take at least an hour to cook. My kitchen. I'm just going to change, I said, my voice pleasant, empty. I walked to the bedroom. Closed the door. Sat on the edge of the bed in the half-dark, shoes still in my lap. The TV blared through the wall. The onion smell was suffocating. I was exhausted. Bone-tired. I had just spent 3 hours managing other people's pain, professionally. And competently. And I had nothing left. Absolutely nothing, not a single drop, for the performance required of the woman who comes home to 6 uninvited relatives and is expected to be delighted about it. I placed my shoes neatly by the wardrobe. Changed into comfortable clothes. Opened my nightstand, pulled out my novel. And I got into bed. I began to read. 14 minutes later, Marcus came in. I know, because I was watching the clock with a detached, clinical interest in my own patients. Hey, he said, closing the door. You okay? Fine, I said, turning a page. Are you coming out? I looked up. No. He stiffened. Clara, Marcus. I put the book down, thumb still marking my place. When did you know they were coming? A pause. This afternoon. This afternoon. So, you had several hours during which you could have called me. I know. I should have. And instead, you let me come home to 6 people in our living room at 6:30 p.m. after a 10-hour shift. I picked the book back up. I've eaten. I'm going to read. You're welcome to join me. There are guests. They are your guests, I said. I didn't invite them. He stood in the doorway, hovering. That particular way of a man who wants to argue but can't find the words. Then he went back out and closed the door. I listened as the muffled sounds of the living room settled back into themselves. And I read my book. Let me be clear. This wasn't the fight. This wasn't the moment everything broke open. This was just a very tired woman, reading a book in her own bedroom. But it was a line. The first line I had ever drawn without immediately walking back across it. And turning those pages in the amber lamplight, while onions fried in my kitchen without my permission, I felt something shifting inside me. Something I didn't yet have words for. The relatives finally left around 10. I heard them go, the chaos of children, coats, goodbyes in the hall, Marcus's voice, low and cheerful, Galina's. Then, the blessed quiet. Marcus came back to the bedroom. I was still reading. He got ready without a word, lay down beside me. We lay in silence for a long time. Then he said, "You were rude." I turned a page. "I was tired," I said. "And I was hungry. And I wasn't told. They're family. So you keep saying." Another silence. Then, "What did you want me to do? Tell them not to come?" "Yes," I said. "Or at minimum, call me. Or ask me. Or acknowledge that this is also my home, and I get a say in who is in it." I closed the book. Pick any of those. Pick all of them. What I didn't want was to walk into my living room after the day I had, and find a dinner party I didn't even know about, already in progress. "You didn't even try," he accused. "You just walked away." I'd already eaten, I reminded him. He turned the lamp off without responding. And in the dark, I lay there and thought, this isn't about the food. He knows it isn't about the food. And the fact that he's pretending it's about the food is itself a piece of information. I filed it away. And I went to sleep. The next 2 weeks were surface normal. Marcus was subtly cooler, carefully distant. The way a man behaves when he's decided you're at fault, but he's too smart to say it directly. I, for my part, was pleasant, present. But I didn't apologize. And I could feel him registering that absence of apology like a missing beat he'd been waiting for. It was new. And I could see it unnerving him. His family texted him more than usual. I knew because he'd go quiet, then emerge with that expression again. The bet on your decency look. I was starting to find it exhausting. Then Galina called me directly. On the Thursday after the visit. I was at work, let it go to voicemail. Listened in my car at lunch. Her voice was warm, wounded, concerned. She hoped I understood that she and the family just wanted to be close to Marcus, and by extension, to me. That it was how their family showed love. I recognized that combination, warmth and wound or as a compound instrument, played to produce a specific result. I thought, she's good at this. Then, she's had a lot of practice. I texted back, thank you for calling, Galina. All fine here, take care. And I left it at that. That weekend, Marcus told me his parents were thinking of visiting the following weekend. I wanted to give you plenty of notice this time, he said, carefully, over coffee. I looked at him, and this time hung in the air. As if the problem was simply logistics, not the fundamental dynamic. Not the lack of consultation. Not the expectation that my home was available on demand. Thank you for the notice, I said. Are they staying here? Just the weekend, he said. They don't want to be any trouble. And there it was. They don't want to be any trouble. That specific phrase, always deployed by people in the process of being tremendous trouble. Marcus, I said, I'd like us to talk about this. Actually talk. Not just about your parents next weekend, but about the whole pattern. I think we need a real conversation about how we handle family visits. He looked at me, hoping for a different sentence. Okay, he said, without warmth. We tried. For 2 solid hours, we sat at the kitchen table. I laid it all out. What I'd been holding back for months, without accusation, in the measured cadence of someone trained to communicate about hard things. I said I loved his family, valued our connection. But I needed our home to be a place I could count on coming home to. Not a revolving door. Not a venue that might contain anything on any given evening. I wasn't asking him to cut anyone off. I was asking for consultation. For advanced notice. For the basic courtesy of being treated as a co-owner of the space we shared. He listened. He nodded. Said he understood. Said he'd do better. He reached across the table, took my hand. I looked at our hands, intertwined, and tried to determine if I believed him. I wanted to. God, I wanted to believe him. Because the alternative, that this conversation would yield the same results as all the others, was a conclusion I wasn't ready for. So I chose to believe him. The way you choose to believe a weather forecast when you desperately need a clear day. With effort, with hope. But with a small, practical voice in the back of my mind, noting, you should probably pack an umbrella anyway. His parents came the next weekend. They were perfectly pleasant. I cooked Saturday evening. Marcus was warm, attentive. Maybe, I thought. Maybe it actually worked. Then Sunday morning. 7 a.m. I woke to a third voice in the kitchen. Not his mother, not his father. Andre. Marcus's cousin, who lived 30 minutes away, had called last night, just driving through, and Marcus, of course, had said, come for breakfast. And hadn't mentioned it to me. Not a word. I lay in bed and listened to them, 3 voices in my kitchen. And I thought, very clearly, very calmly, there it is. I wasn't angry yet. What I felt was closer to sorrow. The specific, hollow sorrow of a hope being confirmed as utterly unfounded. I had given him the clearest account of what I needed. He had understood. Agreed. And then, the very first opportunity to practice it, he'd reverted. Without apparently a second thought. Which meant either the conversation hadn't registered at all, or it had, and he decided that registering was sufficient, requiring no actual change in behavior. Both possibilities were bleak. One was thoughtless. The other was something far, far worse. I got up. Went to the kitchen. Said good morning to Andre, who, to be fair, was a perfectly nice person, bearing no responsibility for his cousin's choices. Made myself coffee. Then I excused myself. I'm going for a run. I ran for 45 minutes in the park 3 blocks east. The park I had known before Marcus. And I thought about what my life looked like from the outside, and what it felt like from the inside. How wide the gap between those 2 views had become. When I got home, Andre was gone. Marcus was washing dishes. He turned around, and that expression was gone. Replaced by something slightly more apprehensive. The look of a man who is starting to understand that the account he's been drawing on might be close to empty. I forgot to mention Andre was coming, he mumbled. I know, I said. It was just breakfast. Marcus, I said, still in my running clothes, hair pulled back, flushed from the cold. I'm going to shower. When I come out, I'd like to talk. Not about Andre specifically. About what happens now. What do you mean, what happens now? I mean, I think we have a problem that's bigger than logistics. And I think we need to decide together whether we're going to solve it. Truly solve it. Not discuss it, then return to default. I went to shower. And while the hot water ran over me, I thought about the options. And I thought about the word that had been forming in my mind for 3 months, gathering mass, the word I had been circling without letting myself land on it. The word was, enough. The shower conversation, the one I'd promised and he'd been dreading, happened at the kitchen table again. Same chairs, same mugs, same window. But the light felt different that Sunday. Harder. Less forgiving. Or maybe I was just different, and light is neutral, and I had been projecting warmth onto it all along. I told Marcus I needed him to understand something I hadn't communicated directly enough before. Because I'd been operating under the assumption that softening the edges of a true thing made it easier to accept. What I'd learned was that softening the edges just made it easier to ignore. So I was going to say it directly. Your family treats our home like a hotel, I said. Not maliciously, I don't think they mean harm. But the effect is the same, regardless of intent. I come home not knowing who will be there. I don't get consulted about guests. When I express discomfort, I'm described as cold or unwelcoming. And when we discuss it, you agree with me, and nothing changes. I held my coffee mug in both hands. That's not a logistics problem, Marcus. That's a priorities problem. And the priority that's consistently losing is me. Marcus was quiet for a long time. The kind of quiet that isn't thoughtful, but defensive. The silence of someone sorting through available responses, looking for one that might diffuse without conceding. Finally, he said, my family is important to me. I know that, I said. They've always been like this. It's how they are. I know that, too, I replied. My question is whether how they are is compatible with what I need. And whether that's something you want to work on, or whether it's something you've decided is simply fixed, that this is how your family operates, and I just need to adjust to it. He looked at me. I don't think it's fair to make me choose. I'm not asking you to choose between me and your family, I said. I'm asking you to choose between 2 versions of our marriage. One where I'm a full partner whose needs have equal weight. And one where I'm managing around your family's access to our space indefinitely, pretending it's fine. I set my mug down. Those are the 2 options. I'd like to know which one you're choosing. The silence that followed was longer than the first. Outside, a bus rumbled past. A dog barked twice, then stopped. Marcus looked at the table. And I looked at Marcus. And I felt, with a clarity that was almost peaceful, that I was about to find out something I hadn't known for certain until this very moment. He said, I don't think you're being reasonable. There it was. Not, I hear you, and I want to do better. Not, you're right, and I've been taking you for granted. Not even a negotiation, a counteroffer. Just, I don't think you're being reasonable. Which wasn't a response to what I'd said. It was a verdict on the person who had said it. Okay, I said. Okay, he repeated. I needed to know where you stood, I said. Now I do. I got up, rinsed my mug, and went to the bedroom. I called my friend Natasha. She'd been hearing my version of this story in installments for 8 months. She answered on the second ring with that specific alertness of someone who's been waiting for this call. Tell me, she said. And I did. Natasha had a spare room. She offered it before I'd even finished the second paragraph of my account. Decisive, no nonsense. The way a woman offers when she's watched a friend diminish gradually and has been silently preparing her response. I told her I wasn't ready to move, I needed a few days. She said, fine. But the offer stands. It doesn't expire. Instead of moving immediately, I did what I'd learned working with families in crisis. I documented. Not aggressively, not with hostility, just carefully. Dates, details, the last 6 months of uninvited visits. Our conversations. The Andre breakfast. Marcus's unreasonable verdict. I kept the notebook in my bag. I also called my father that evening. My father, unlike Marcus's family, always called weeks in advance, framing it as a question, never an announcement. He was a retired accountant, quiet, with a talent for finding the structural problem beneath the surface problem. When I told him everything, the full, unfiltered version. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, "The apartment is yours." Not a question. A confirmation. "Yes," I said. "You bought it before the marriage?" "Yes." "And the mortgage is in your name?" "Yes, we've been splitting costs, but the deed and mortgage are mine." "Good," he said quietly. "Practically." The word landing like something set firmly on a table. "Keep that in mind." I did. The week that followed had the strange, over-vivid quality of days you know are going to matter. Marcus and I moved around each other with careful politeness. The silence of two people who've said real things and are waiting to see what those real things produce. He didn't bring up Sunday's conversation. He didn't apologize. He wasn't unkind, just absent. Retreating into his routines as a form of defense. Dishes. Shows. Work. Keeping to the shallow register of daily life, where nothing important could be said or decided. I went to work. Saw my patients. Came home. Made dinner. Ate it. Cleaned up. And every evening, sitting at my kitchen table, with the amber light filtering through the west-facing windows, I thought, how long can I do this? Not as a dramatic question. Genuinely, practically, how long can I maintain this version of my life before it costs me something I can't get back? On Thursday, Galina called again. This time, I answered. "Clara," she said, warm, immediately purposeful. "I've been thinking about you. Are you and Marcus all right?" "We're navigating some things," I said. "True." Revealed nothing. "I spoke to him," she said. Something in my chest went tight. "He's very hurt, you know. He feels like you've been pulling away from the family, like you don't want us around." I held the phone. Breathed. "Galina," I said, "what did Marcus tell you?" "Just that things have been difficult. That I've been unhappy about family visits." "Did he tell you that he and I had a conversation last Sunday about what I need from our marriage?" A slight pause. "He mentioned there had been some tension. Did he tell you what I said during that conversation?" Another pause. "He said you felt the family visited too much." I told her, very calmly, I needed to be consulted before guests came to our home. I needed to be treated as a partner in this marriage. Those are the things I said. I paused. The fact that Marcus summarized that as me not wanting the family around is itself informative. Galina was quiet. Then, a slightly different tone. Still warm, but with something harder underneath. A note of authority, like a tablecloth covering an unfinished table. "Clara, you married into a family. That means adjustments." "Yes," I said. "It means adjustments from everyone, including me, which I have been making. And including Marcus, which he has not. He loves you very much." "I believe that," I said. "Love and accountability aren't mutually exclusive. You know, it would mean a great deal to all of us if you came to the family dinner on Saturday. It might help smooth things over." I noticed the word smooth, implying the surface was what needed work, not the crumbling structure beneath it. "I'll think about it," I said. "Thank you for calling, Galina." I hung up. Sat in my quiet office, the afternoon light fading. And I thought. Marcus called his aunt before he talked to me again. He went to his family with our conflict before he came to me with an apology. Which meant that whatever sorting he was doing in his private internal life, he was sorting it in their direction, not mine. He was triangulating. Bringing his family into our marriage to manage a conflict that existed within our marriage. Because managing it with his family present was something he knew how to do. And managing it alone, with me, was something he apparently did not. I drove home that night and did not stop for a sandwich. I was not hungry. I sat in the parking lot outside our building for 15 minutes, just looking at the lit windows on the third floor. Our windows. Amber and warm. And I thought about the life on the other side of those windows. And whether it was still the life I had planned to live. Inside, Marcus was making dinner. Pasta, my favorite kind. A glass of white wine at my place. He looked up, an expression attempting warmth, but running thin at the edges, like paint not quite sticking. "Galina called me," he said. "She said you talked." "We did," I said, putting my bag down, hanging up my coat. "She thought the Saturday dinner might be a good idea, a chance to Marcus," I said, sitting down at the table. "Did you tell your aunt about our conversation before you spoke to me again about it?" He was quiet. "Because I want to understand the sequence," I continued. "Sunday morning, I tell you what I need. You say I'm being unreasonable. Monday through Thursday, you speak to your aunt about it. She calls me Thursday to suggest I come to a family dinner to smooth things over. I looked at him steadily. At what point in that sequence did you plan to come back to me? His jaw tightened. I was thinking about it. You were managing it, I said. With your family. Which is what you always do. You don't bring it to me. You bring it to them. And then they come to me with a solution that happens to involve me being more available to them. I picked up the wine glass, held it. That's not a marriage, Marcus. That's a system I happen to be living inside of. He sat down. Just looked at me. And what I saw in his face was not the bet on your decency expression. Not the apprehensive one. What I saw was something raw. And, to be fair, I think it was genuine. I think he looked at me in that moment and saw, perhaps for the first time clearly, the gap between what he'd been offering and what I'd needed. And the length of time that gap had been open. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought he might say the thing that could have changed the direction we were moving. He said, I don't know how to make you happy. I put the wine glass down. I know, I said. And that was the saddest thing I said in the whole conversation. Because it was true. And because it wasn't an accusation, but a diagnosis. And because I understood in that moment that not knowing how to make me happy, and not being willing to try, were, for Marcus, functionally the same thing. I ate the pasta. It was good. I told him so. We watched something on television. I went to bed. He came to bed later. We lay in the dark like two people who had run out of sentences. Which is its own kind of answer. The family dinner was Saturday. I did not go. I told Marcus Friday evening that I was going to pass, that I had some things I needed to take care of, and I hoped he had a good time. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. The nod of a man who has lost the argument but isn't ready to say so. He went without me. I heard him leave at 6:15. I sat in the quiet apartment and felt the specific piece of a space that was, for a few hours, only mine. I called Natasha. I called my father. Made tea. Sat in my armchair, the one I'd carried up 3 flights, and watched the amber light, which had no loyalty to anyone and was simply itself. And I let myself think the thought I had been circling for weeks. I wanted him to leave. Not out of hatred. Not out of revenge or satisfaction. I wanted him to leave because I was 34 years old, and I had built a good life that I was good at living. And somewhere in the course of a marriage that had seemed like abundance and had turned out to be a slow dispossession, I had lost the particular quality of ease I'd had in this apartment before he moved in. And I wanted it back. I wanted to come home to a space that was mine, and know that it would be mine when I arrived. I wanted to make a cup of tea without doing math about who else might be here. I wanted the dish cabinet, the bathroom, the armchair, the west-facing windows in the late afternoon to be simple again. To be just what they were, and not a negotiation. I wanted my life back. And sitting in the quiet apartment on a Saturday evening, while my husband ate dinner with the family that had eaten mine, I understood, wanting it was not enough. I would have to do something about it. I spoke to a lawyer on Monday. My father, of course, had a name. He always does, collecting information in the quiet, thorough way of cautious people, in case it becomes useful. I called from my car at lunch, explained, got an appointment for Wednesday. Her name was Vera Soalova. Precise, unsentimental. Someone who deals in facts, not feelings. And respects you enough not to pretend the facts are comfortable. I brought my documents, deed, mortgage papers, the spreadsheet of shared expenses I'd been keeping for 2 years without entirely knowing why. She went through them efficiently. Looked up. You've been thorough. I've been careful, I said. She nodded, as if those were the same thing. She explained my position. The apartment was legally, unambiguously mine. Marcus had no claim. Our financial entanglement was limited to shared accounts for joint expenses, easily addressable. In legal terms, the situation was clean. What it wouldn't be was easy, or fast, or comfortable. Are you certain? She asked. Before we go any further. I've been certain for 3 weeks, I said. I've been waiting to make sure the certainty was real, and not just reactive. She nodded again. Then let's talk about what comes next. What came next began Friday evening. Marcus came home at 6:30. I was in the kitchen, not cooking. That was the first thing he noticed. The absence of dinner. The cold stove. Me, sitting at the table with a cup of tea, a folder in front of me. He looked at the folder, then at me. His posture shifted, the way a body adjusts before the mind fully processes what it's seeing. Sit down, I said. Not unkindly, just directly. He Saturday. I told him what I had decided. I had spent 6 months trying to have a conversation that would produce a different outcome. Each time, it had produced the same. I understood now, this wasn't a failure of communication. It was a reflection of our actual incompatibility. I told him I wanted him to move out. The apartment was mine, had always been mine. I wasn't asking him to leave my life, that was his choice, but I was asking him to leave my home. I told him about the lawyer, the straightforward process, my desire to handle it with dignity. He was very still. When I finished, he said nothing for a long moment. Then, is this because of my family? I thought about how to answer. It's because of us, I said finally. Your family is the place where us became visible. But the problem isn't your aunt, or Dmitri, or Galina. The problem is that I have been telling you what I need for months, and you have consistently chosen not to hear it. Not because you're a bad person. Because hearing it would have required you to do something difficult. And doing something difficult where your family is concerned is something you're not able to do. And I cannot build a life with someone who is not able to do that. You could have tried harder, he said. I tried for 6 months, I replied. I tried with conversations. With patience. With adjustments. With giving you the benefit of the doubt when the doubt had run out. I am done trying in a direction that doesn't go anywhere. I paused. I don't want to fight about this. I'm not angry. I'm just finished. He looked at me for a long time. His face was doing several things at once. Grief, anger, the specific wounded pride of a man who has been told a truth he cannot argue against. Then he stood up, pushed his chair back, and went to the bedroom. I heard the sounds of things being moved, the wardrobe opening. I sat at the kitchen table, my tea now cold, and listened to my husband pack a bag. He left that night, to stay at his brother's. He kissed my forehead at the door, which surprised me. I'm sorry I wasn't better, he said. And I looked at him and thought, me, too. I genuinely thought, me, too. The weeks after that had a strange quality. Sad, quiet. And also, underneath the sadness, something that kept presenting itself when I wasn't guarding against it, relief. It arrived in the mornings first. I'd wake up, the apartment would be still. The amber light would stream through the west-facing windows. And I would lie there, knowing, with the clean certainty of something restored, that nobody was coming through that door today without my prior knowledge. That the kitchen was mine. The bathroom cabinet was mine. The armchair. The linen closet. The Saturday mornings. All mine. It was a small thing, in the way that breathing is a small thing. Unremarkable when present. Its absence, the whole world. Galina called, as I knew she would. 3 times in the first 2 weeks. On the third, I answered. She was upset, not entirely performed. Real distress. The distress of a woman who had watched a family she loved contract around a conflict she had contributed to creating. I let her speak. When she finished, I said, Galina, I want you to know that I hold nothing against you personally. But I need you to understand that what happened between Marcus and me wasn't about a dinner, or a visit, or any one incident. It was about a pattern Marcus and I couldn't resolve together. That's between us. Please don't take it as a statement about you. She was quiet for a moment. Then, with a quietness I think was genuine, I think we did ask too much of you. It cost her something to say that. I could hear it. Thank you, I said. I appreciate that. We haven't spoken since. Probably what's needed for now. Marcus and I reached our legal resolution in 8 weeks, just as Vera had predicted. He was not unreasonable about it. That surprised me, in a good way. It made me think that the version of him I had once believed in wasn't entirely fictional, just insufficient for the life I needed. He took what was his. I kept what was mine. We signed the papers on a Wednesday morning in Vera's office, and walked out into the cold street separately, going in different directions. Which is also its own kind of answer. My father came to visit the second weekend of March. Drove 4 hours. Arrived at noon. Parked in the right spot because I'd texted him which one was free. Knocked on my door instead of using a key, because I hadn't given him one yet. When I opened the door, he looked at me for a moment, taking inventory, the way he always does, measuring if the person in front of him matches the voice on the phone. Then he said, "You look well." "I am," I said, surprisingly. "Not surprisingly," he said, and came inside. We cooked together that afternoon, like when I was growing up. Him handling the precision, me the intuition. Moving with the easy efficiency of decades of shared rhythm. He replaced a loose cabinet hinge. Asked about my patience. I told him about Ethan, who'd had a breakthrough that week, making his mother cry in my office. My father listened, fully, intently. When we sat down to eat, he looked around the apartment. The amber light. The armchair. The Lisbon painting back on the wall, rehung by me. "It looks like you," he said. "It does now," I replied. He nodded once. The nod of a practical man who understands some statements don't need elaboration. It's been 4 months since Marcus moved out. Long enough for this new life to settle into a shape. Long enough for it to feel like mine, rather than a temporary arrangement. My mornings are quiet. My evenings are mine to plan. I've had Natasha for dinner twice, my colleague Remo once, my father every other weekend. And each time someone comes through my door, it's because I have chosen it. Because I have said yes. Because the invitation was mine to give. I am not without sadness. I need to be honest about that. Because the story of the woman who reclaims her life and finds everything is better, simpler, freer, afterwards, that's not entirely the story I'm living. I miss certain things. Not many, but some. The sound of another person in the apartment on a Sunday morning. The ease of early love, before it revealed its limits. The version of Marcus that might have been possible in a different life, with a different inheritance. I mourn those things at odd moments, the way you mourn things that were always a little theoretical. Something that isn't quite grief, not quite regret, but lives in the neighborhood of both. What I don't mourn. The 6 relatives on the couch. The 3 mugs set out by automatic reflex. The smile that cost nothing and meant nothing, the one I wore like a tool. I haven't worn that smile since. I went for a run last Saturday morning in the park, 3 blocks east. The park I've known since before any of this. Early enough to be cold, that pale winter cold that makes the light clean, particular. I ran my usual loop, then sat on a bench for a few minutes. Not in a hurry, because I'm often not anymore. A dog put its head briefly against my knee, then moved on. 2 children argued, then resolved it without adult intervention. The bakery on the corner was opening. I could smell it from the park. Bread, something sweet. The kind of smell that asks nothing from you, and gives you something anyway. I sat there for a while. The apartment would be there when I got back. Amber lit. Quiet. Mine. Nobody in it that I hadn't invited. The cabinet hinge fixed. The dish rack where I kept it. The cedar blocks in my linen closet. The Lisbon painting at the height I had chosen. The door had my name on the lease. The lock answered to my key. I got up. And I ran home. Some things, when you get them back, you understand for the first time how much they always cost. My ordinary life, the one I had before, the quiet street, the good light, the park, the bakery, the amber evenings, it hadn't been ordinary at all. It had been something I'd built carefully, over years. And I'd given it away, piece by piece, in the belief that love required it. It does not. Love, the real kind, the kind worth keeping, does not ask for the thing you are. It works around the thing you are. It learns its way through the space you occupy without rearranging you to fit. I am learning again to occupy my own space. Without apology. It is going well. The door has my name on it. That is where I will leave this story. With that small, sufficient, entirely real fact. The door has my name on it. And I came home. So, what do you think? Have you ever felt like you were losing yourself, or your space, in a relationship? Or what would you have done when Marcus said, "I don't think you're being reasonable"? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts.